Welcome back to Pints Politics, episode what, Heath?
Well, we had the MJ episode, so it's 24. 23 was the last one. 24 today, baby.
One day we'll just stop counting.
I know.
And just say welcome back.
That's right.
But
yeah, that's right.
Today's episode, of course, as always, brought to you by Comer Distributing. And today's beer,
Savannah River Brewing Company. No jacket required. And it's a Czech-style Pilsner 5.3. And it looks, I mean, again, the artwork. I mean, it beats Budweiser or Coors Light or even the Banquet. You know, it looks like you're on a lake somewhere.
Some say that spending money on artwork is a wasteful way to spend money.
It's a good way to know that your beer sucks. I'm just teasing. Hey, but this tastes like, Tad and I were talking about, it tastes like St. Pauli Girl, Beck's, Heineken. So it's true to the marketing materials.
Cheers.
Yeah.
And then also 742 North.
Yeah.
The studio that we are recording at.
Yep. If you need a desktop to come and work, if you need an office space, Wi-Fi, or just a good cup of coffee, come check out 742 North right here in Rock Hill. So, yeah, man, we had to come back this past week to gather in Columbia to pass a budget.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah. A lot of conference committees. So when we pass bills in the House, or our colleagues in the Senate, when they pass bills, they cross over. They go to the other sides of the lobby. Hopefully they get passed. So that legislation goes and gets signed by the governor, like Gavin's law, right?
Yeah.
Started in the House, went to the Senate, goes to the governor. When there is some dispute in the version of the legislation, it'll go to a conference committee. And so there's a lot of conference committees out there. One was on the budget.
Yes.
And they passed out their conference report, which was our 2024, 2025 budget. So that was the main reason why we were going down there. But there was also others to consider, and we'll get into those.
Yeah, and I came down a day early because I had the Department of Homeland Security press conference on Tuesday, because we were originally supposed to be in office or in session on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right. And that was with Secretary Mayorkas.
Well, wasn't there, but
really,
I guess the heads of the Department of Homeland Security, I know out of Charlotte, out of D.C.,
the regional folks,
they came down, and with the Know to Protect campaign that they are launching, which will be a great additional resource.
Now, what is that?
So Know to Protect is going to have resources and tools to report child sexual abuse material or child sex exploitation situations.
Okay.
Right now, everything's kind of been going through NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. So Know to Protect is going to be an additional resource that is provided from the government that connects directly in with Homeland Security to provide those daily and weekly updates on statistics. One of the statistics that shocked me as they were speaking, they said the number of exploitation cases for the first time ever broke 1 million in 2022, but by 2023 it was over 3 million.
It had already tripled?
And those are just the reported ones.
Right.
So I would say 80 to 90% of the people that I deal with, the hundreds of people that I've dealt with in these situations, they don't report it.
Yeah, correct.
So that just shows goes to show you how scary things are really getting.
Yep. And I went down there early on Tuesday. I actually had my day job took me down there. And then our colleague over in the Senate, Harvey Peeler, who has spent 44 years serving our state, he had a portrait unveiling. So I just, took that opportunity to go over and.
That's a really good portrait, too.
Yeah, it is.
Some of them don't look that great. His actually kind of look more like a picture.
Yeah. And, a lot of these ceremonies, it's a ceremony, right? But this one I really enjoyed because the senators who introduced Harvey, whether it was Setzler, Luke Rankin, Malloy, Verdon, had been his colleagues for 20 plus years. And so they all had good
stories
to tell. And they told them, it was, it was fun. They traded barbs,
jokes, pranks
Yeah.
they had pulled on one another. And, it just, it goes to show you why you're in there. I know, to the folks who don't know, it's Democrats, Republicans, we're always supposed to be fighting, right? And that's not the case. There's a lot of personal relationships that get formed when you do battle over policy or when you are battling about legislation. But you can tell there's a lot of respect in that room for one another.
Yeah, well, you don't have to agree on policy, but as long as you are respectful to one another. And, it's funny because people will log on to watch us debate on the floor. They're like, oh, God, this is boring. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of one of those things where if you're inside, like you understand the little jokes and cuts that are coming at someone from the well, then it becomes a lot more entertaining, I guess you could say. Yeah,
so I got down there on Tuesday myself while you were doing the Homeland Security thing. I was doing a little bit of work and then went over to see Harvey and that ceremony. And then I actually took a meeting with a vice president over at USC, Julius Friedrichsen.
Yep.
I think he's heading up research in the AI stuff that the university is trying to, I guess, get involved with. And just talking to him about where AI is going, where's, say, the University of South Carolina's focus going to be, and then also how are they collaborating with Clemson University, College of Charleston, and a lot of our tech schools.
Yeah.
So while each school can maybe have a primary focus, let them all be collaborating.
As it should be.
Yeah.
Just, I think one of the best points you made to me whenever I was talking to you about it, you said, a company can't own math.
Yeah.
A company can't own AI.
Yep.
We have to learn how to work within it and work with it.
Yeah. So it was good. But, we'll be talking about in this episode, we're going to talk about that budget conference report. We'll go into some of the highlights of that. We'll also talk about some other, I know the JMSC reform was one. There were some other conference reports that came out. We'll also be talking about.
There's one that failed, too. We'll talk about it.
Yep, we will. And also Senate Bill 915, which was the healthcare agency consolidation bill. That came back up again. That rumor mill got started by some of our colleagues in the House who ended up having a press conference and then claimed victory of something that never happened.
Let's be honest. Don't sit here. You and your benefit of the doubt. It's just funny that it's been said, I don't know how many times, that we are not going to amend sine die unless the Senate does so. The Freedom Caucus sent out their call to action with all of their little love bomb groups to get them to send this stuff out.
We just want to tease it. We just want to let the two listeners know what's to come. So we'll tackle that. We also want to talk about, it is primary season, runoff elections, and we also want to talk about the local one here, our sheriff's
race.
Yep, for sure. So, but first things first, let's talk about the grizzly bear that has entered the lobby.
It does sound that way. Speaking of bears, have you seen there is a bear loose around within my district in Lake Wiley, and then there's one in
black
TK?
Bear.
Yeah,
that's right, man. I tell you what, I keep throwing my trash up there on. They love my trash.
It keeps Callie not only watching out for cars but for bears as well.
But yeah, first things first. Let's talk about the budget. I know you went on what was it, Palmetto Mornings here, the local WRHI.
Went on to discuss some of the key talking points.
Yep, and just broad brushing here, and then you can get into some of the details. I know we focused on tax relief, so we can get into the hundreds of millions of dollars that we basically issued back in tax relief. Also, our focus on raising minimum pay for teachers and law enforcement was another one.
We got that up to $47,000
for teachers.
Yes, I mean that was a
I didn't realize
big step.
In the last decade the minimum pay for teachers has been raised by 70%.
Yeah.
70% in 10 years.
It was so low.
It was like 28. You know what I mean? It's just astounding.
Which
that
if
10 years.
If you want quality educators, then you need to be able to pay them to make a living.
You know the adage, you pay for what you get.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so true. So pay raises for teachers, law enforcement, also prioritized infrastructure, bridge repair, that sort of thing. And then I want to talk about some big ticket items. But
well, I mean, locally, I think that Senator Clymer's getting a lot of recognition, and you're very quiet. You don't care about recognition, but you deserve it on one of these provisos. You know, Senator Clymer and I worked on the private school kids to be able to play sports. We got that in the budget.
Yep.
But you and Senator Clymer worked very hard to require students to have to use the restroom of their assigned berth.
Yes. And that was a timing issue, right? And you are correct. I do not care about recognition. A lot of times, people probably don't even think I do anything, and perfectly fine unless I lose an election.
You're my lapdog, right?
But yeah, as far as recognition goes, it just happened that when this came up, my daughter was dealing with this personally.
Yeah.
Okay, this was a personal issue for me. I tried to work behind the scenes to see if we couldn't make sure that the kids who were experiencing some gender dysphoria or some mental health issues that wanted to use, they were biological males who wanted to use the girls' bathroom. I wanted to make sure they felt safe when going to the restroom.
Yes.
And I was trying to find some informal way that we could do that and make sure those kids were taken care of, to no avail. So we had to figure out something. We had already passed our budget, so I couldn't put a proviso on the House side. So I went to our friend and colleague in the Senate, Wes Clymer, and he was more than happy.
Well, I mean, and we had that bill drawn up.
Yes.
Matter of fact, it's still sitting on my desk.
Yep.
And you were out, and I was told, hey, you might want to submit this for Heath. And I think I was number 2 on it, but just signing on to it with you. But at the same time, it was like, I'm not going to submit it until I find out. Whenever I called you, you said, no, we're working on a plan.
Yeah, well,
Can you go into that plan a little bit, or you want to keep that?
Well, and again, it's because I'm averse to drawing attention to myself.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. I'd rather be behind the scenes, do the work, let other people claim credit. Let's get the win and move to the next. That's just my MO. That's the way I like to work. And when I brought it up, what that involved was press conferences. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And they're like, why? We need to highlight our efforts. And I said, no, it's not that I don't want to highlight our efforts, but I also want to get the win. Yeah. And then we can talk about it.
We don't need to sit there and waste so much time on the floor whenever we're tight on time.
Yeah.
And try and have this argument.
Yeah, but anyway, couldn't beat crossover. So it's great to have colleagues in the Senate that you can work with.
Yeah.
You know, and so we have a great, whether it's Senator Johnson or Senator Clymer, and there's a laundry list of senators.
Yes.
Who
Kimbrell, Adams.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of them. So Wes got it on, and
then it was pulled off whenever it came to the House.
Yes,
but our conference committee got it back in.
Yes, yep. So, and I think both the Senate and House conferences agreed on that, obviously. So.
Yeah, and then we also had the proviso which allows Ellen Weaver's office to ban cell phones in classrooms if they want to. It didn't say that we are banning cell phones.
Yes, it gives them that
the
option.
Ability to do so.
Yep, which I think Rock Hill schools already do.
Right.
During class time. You cannot have a cell phone in the classroom. Like, you can keep in your book bag. Yeah. So when the bell rings or whatever, lunch, that sort of thing.
But not in the classroom.
That is correct.
And that's I couldn't even bring in a hat in the classroom or the teacher would take it.
Correct.
Much less, and now everyone's flipping out like, oh, you can't tell me my kid can't carry their phone. Now, granted, they don't have lockers like we used to.
I know.
So that becomes a little bit.
Well, they're not carrying as many books either.
But those were 4 big, very important provisos to the citizens within York County that we heard from constantly.
Yeah, so let's, because I think we're sort of jumbling up the finance side of the budget and then also some of the provisos. So let's talk about those provisos again. It was basically biological sex has to go to that bathroom. Right.
And then we had the private Christian schools being able to participate in public school sports.
Just like homeschoolers.
Just like homeschoolers.
Okay.
That's all it was.
Yep.
And the same thing for public schools.
And then appropriate age books being in the children's section.
Of our libraries, not just school libraries.
Yeah,
because
public.
we passed legislation for schools, but we didn't have anything for our public libraries.
Okay, so that one was in there. Was there a fourth one?
The fourth one was the proviso for the cell phone banning.
Okay, there you go.
But that just gave the permission, so to say.
And again, I think all of those 4 provisos speak to common sense.
Yes.
You know, those aren't difficult. And anyone, and again, I know there may be some folks left of us that may say, or center or right, I don't care, may say that, folks who or young adults who are experiencing transgender, gender dysphoria, whatever you want to define that as, need to be able to go into the bathrooms that they identify with.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to disagree.
Well, and it mainly becomes, and as I said, it's one of the things I brought up on Palmetto Mornings was often you get labeled as being homophobic or transphobic or whatever phobic that they want to put on there.
Right.
But really it boils down to keeping our daughters safe.
Yep.
Them feeling safe.
Correct.
How many women or girls were not going to the restroom because they didn't feel safe at school?
Yeah. Or, folks, I don't think it should be necessary that daughters my age, 14, 15-year-old girls, have to make a plan or strategize how to get in and out of a bathroom safely.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, that responsibility falls upon us as parents, our school board, and our school district staff, principals, down the line to teachers.
And our school
to
board
ensure personal safety for every student.
Yeah.
I don't care if the school resource officer has to go to the few students who are experiencing gender dysphoria or their biological sex doesn't match their gender identification. Escort them to whatever bathroom they want to go to. That would be my policy. I don't care.
Yeah.
Roll out the red carpet. Make sure that kid feels safe. Take him to a teacher bathroom. I don't care. A single stall. Make sure they feel safe. That's it. But the flip side of that is straight, cis, whatever you want to call it, people need to feel safe as
in
well.
Their restrooms as well.
And it's not that difficult.
It shouldn't be an issue. And to give our local school board credit as well, they've been pushing this, but we're aware that if we could not get this passed, then it could open up them for liability.
Yeah.
So there was a big push. I would get phone calls, "Hey, Guffey, why aren't you doing more for this?" And I'm like, look, this is a Wes and Heath thing. Let them work their way before I try to come in like a bull in a china shop and screw everything
Let's
up.
don't throw a grenade in a crowded room and, everybody's walking out hurt, But, there were some social provisos in a budget, which is typical when you go to a session and the legislation doesn't get passed, right? So now, again, for our two listeners, these provisos are 1-year enactments, right? So we're going to have to follow this stuff up.
Have to get the legislation going.
Yep.
And
I just can't see.
Stay.
Yep.
But.
Yeah. We'll have to renew it if we cannot pass legislation. But also, on a federal district court level, I think we're in the federal, what are we, District 4?
Is it 4th Circuit?
In
Virginia?
It's Virginia and the Carolinas,
Yeah.
And then the 5th is over to our west, so that would be Georgia, I think Alabama.
I get the we have a liberal federal court system.
Yeah, well, especially in the 4th, but in our district. But also, if I'm understanding this correctly, our federal district court ruled that gender isn't a qualifying issue. Like, we cannot make girls and boys bathrooms, which is ridiculous. But then I think the other neighboring federal district court said, yes, you absolutely can. My point being, that's going to have to be determined next year in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I think that's the natural, that's how our founding fathers built our way of government. I think that the question needs to be answered there. Now again, that's not the final for me in my house, but
that's one of them situations where I don't really care what the court says.
Me neither. But I think the judicial branch needs to step up and take on this issue, and answer it for us. So,
and then now let's go on the financial side of things within the budget. One of the big things was the tax cuts.
Yep.
Do you want to go over them? You want me to go over them?
Yeah, we can both. The income tax relief, I think it was $200 million.
$200 million new this year, which is, for years 3 and 4 of the individual tax cuts. So the total so far since they passed that, it's been $900 million. But in addition
so for the two listeners, we're basically paying income tax of 6.2. Now again, that's the stated rate, and I know that's stated rate, and that's come down. Well, you just talked about years 3 and 4. Before we even got here, our predecessors, Bruce Bryan in 48 and Gary Simmerlin, they enacted legislation that created a income tax reduction and it would stair step down over the years as long as the economy of the state was healthy.
Correct.
And so in the last 4 years, it has gone from 7 now down to 6.2.
No,
on paper.
Well,
on paper.
that's the high end rate.
Yes, correct.
So that becomes the misleading rate, should I say?
Yeah. So
The effective income rate, which is what average citizen pays.
yeah.
It was 3.4% in 2020. It was estimated down to 2.8 in 2022. So it's even lower than that now. So
Right.
that puts us in states that charge state income tax.
Yes.
We're
Sixth
one of the
or-
5 lowest
Yeah.
right now.
Effective income tax rates.
Correct.
Yeah.
So while that high number dings us and makes us look like we charge more than everyone else at that above 6%,
Yep.
we're actually
So your
lower
high
across the
earners
board.
are paying.
They're paying more than they would in another state,
Yep.
but our overall citizens are paying less.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha.
So that was a good thing. And the top rate in 2022 was 7%.
Yes.
So
And it's down to 6.2.
yeah.
Okay.
And now our total tax relief that we have in this budget was $1 billion.
Yep.
And this is something people don't really understand whenever they're talking about the budget. We have a balanced budget amendment.
Yes.
Therefore, what comes in,
Unlike our federal colleagues.
correct, we have to spend it.
Hey, why don't we do that in D.C.?
So even whenever we say that we are giving you a tax break or tax cut, if we're going to send the money back to you, technically we are spending the money on
To
you.
give it back, yes.
Correct.
Because we're writing Brandon Guffey a check for $380.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and just to give a comparison, this year in the budget, the state of South Carolina we spent $14.4 billion, but total with the federal money and with the other money is $42.2 billion. Now the narrative was, we raised the budget. Well, total last year we spent, state was 13.9 and total was 41 billion. So technically 1.2 billion up raised. Now, we got 1 billion in tax refunds or tax credits
right.
coming back. We also just raised the pay of every teacher
Yeah.
throughout the state.
Which effectively, I think that added up to like 200 some odd million, right?
I mean, I don't know what the total number
I
was.
believe that's right. 200 million.
And we are having to base or make our guess on what the income levels are going to be whenever we're writing that budget, and it gets a little bit more accurate by the time we're at this stage. But it doesn't matter what it is. If that money's in, we have to spend it, even if we're sending it back to citizens.
Yes, that is correct.
So people need to
So
understand
it's almost
that.
like a double count.
Yeah.
You know.
So our budget's going to go up every year if we're a healthy state.
Because we're
collecting more and more money.
And we're cutting that tax relief is basically a line item on the budget.
Right. If our population's going up, our budget should go up.
Yeah, correct.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't come back to the citizens.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's just a horrible way of twisting things.
Yep. And again, we're talking about this budget with teacher pay raises. We're talking about law enforcement pay raises. We're talking about tax relief. We're talking about infrastructure.
The roads. I mean, we spent over $500 million just on roads and bridges.
Yeah. And I tell you, folks, I'm a member on our regional transportation, RFATS is what we call it. And so what we do is we take that federal money that we get from the federal government and, try to identify projects like 160 interchange. We're looking at the interchanges at Cherry Road and Celanese. Roads and bridges aren't getting any cheaper.
No.
I mean,
Whenever
is
I got
astounding.
on council in 2020, it was about $750,000 to pave a mile.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's above that, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. It's probably doubled.
And so, and the way that I had to deal with it because of the Panther deal, we had very little money. So let's say we only had, $5 million to put in to pave the local roads, because through the C funds, that is what our local council members get to decide which roads are most important. They're the ones that live in the area. They should
Right.
make that decision. Many people would divide it up. My focus was on consolidating, get as much square miles or linear miles paved as possible. But we just increased that. I mean, we're talking $200 million of that budget going to our county council members to
county C
have
funds,
that and C funds. And, you know, I have gotten very fed up with the negative sides of the budget.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about some of the big ticket items that I'm sure is going to make, some headlines. One of the biggest was $175 million to finish the veterinary school over there at.
That's only year 2 of what, 4 it's going to be to get this thing done?
I think this 175 was to finish it.
Oh, that would be great.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have to deal with it next year.
Yeah.
That's what's held up the budget for 2 years.
At least the negotiations, So also another big ticket item was the $100 million for the investment in the med school, expanding the med school at USC, the premier
with repealing
higher education
CON
institute in South Carolina.
I mean, since we repealed CON, that seems like a good investment because we want more medical professionals here.
Yeah, and they're building that brain center. Man, I'm telling you, talking about aging, how aging affects the brain, also special needs, head trauma, and those types of things. I'm excited to see what that's going to do.
I seen an interesting study talking about margarine and butter, and
how it affects the brain
and brain matter, and showing that if you put margarine outside and butter outside, animals will eat the butter but won't touch the margarine. And it just talks about how your brain matter is made up.
Oh, wow.
It was very interesting.
I'm glad I eat that Kerrygold, like the Irish butter or the Plugra.
Yeah.
Get Plugra. That is the highest natural fat content butter I've been able to find. And it is jam up, jelly tight. So I know we went over the numbers on the budget, some of the provisos, but, with everything we do as far as governing, there's also the politics of it. And I wanted to talk about the politics of the budget to our 2 listeners, because a budget's not perfect. You'd agree.
No.
Probably 70% of it we're 100% behind. The other 30% we're just like, oh man.
Yeah.
It's just that's just the way it is. Because the fact of the matter is you got to get a majority of the House and a majority of the Senate.
Right.
Which basically makes up that conference committee when you're negotiating. And, you got to get all those folks to agree. And what one member wants in a budget may make you want to puke. But if it gets you and you can check 7, 8 of 10 of your boxes, hey, man.
Well, last year we caught hell because of the BMX money.
Yeah.
The people that aren't from this area don't understand what a big deal that was and what the return on investment was.
Yeah.
So they just see it and they're like, why are we spending $500,000 on BMX
on bicycles,
racing?
on bicycle racing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was a boon for the local economy here.
Huge.
Hotels, restaurants, not to mention that local tourism tax and all those things that come
income
from
coming in keeps our taxes lower.
Yeah. So I wanted to address some of that because I noticed some of our colleagues in the Freedom Caucus voted against it, and I think you took a picture of the board, just like some of.
Yeah, I mean, for the past year and a half, they've been spinning that narrative.
Yep.
And it's been an issue. So I took a picture of the board and those 4 important things, which are things that the Freedom Caucus supposedly fights for, keeping pornography out of, not pornography, but just keeping adult material out of children's sections of libraries.
Yes. Public libraries.
Yeah,
right.
Public libraries.
And so I want to go through that. And if you have that picture of the board, but was it every Freedom Caucus member voted against the budget again? That was present.
It was Beach, Chumley.
Was Cromer absent?
Harris. Cromer was not there.
Okay.
It was Stuart Jones, Kilmartin, Magnuson, May, McCabe, both Morgans, O'Neill, Pace, Trantham, and Joe White was absent, and Aremus voted for the budget.
Okay. What about Thomas Beach? He voted against it too,
Beach
right?
voted against it. He's the one who posted his...
Yep, so he posted, his objections to the budget. And And I'll just read it. It said, yesterday I voted against the state budget with a handful of other courageous souls who believe the state is overspending and government needs to be reined in. So, I'm not a courageous soul like Thomas Beach and his compatriots, I guess. But
well, I was courageous enough to keep boys out of our girls' bathrooms and vote for the budget. Because that was far more important than any of these things he lists on here.
And again, I'll get to that. But you can be both and is what I'm getting to, right? You can. I do believe that the state can be a better steward of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
Right? The budget isn't perfect. I would agree with Thomas Beach on that. Right? And I believe that government spending, it should be a priority every time, should be reined in. And that's why we got back over $1 billion in tax relief. Right? $1 billion.
Yeah.
That's a B. But he voted against it. And his comrades in the Freedom Caucus did the same. So while he claims to be a courageous soul by voting against it, that means he voted against protecting our young girls in our schools.
Correct.
By allowing biological men into their bathrooms. He voted against protecting young women.
Correct.
Okay? In effect, by voting no on a budget. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason I posted. Not only that, he voted to continue to allow public libraries to keep adult content in children's sections, which that's one of the things that he lists on here, and he calls it grooming.
And another thing that is, that we've talked about is the dangers of cell phones. And a proviso, like we stated in the earlier segment, allows schools the option to keep kids from getting to their cell phones during instruction time, classrooms.
Correct.
He voted basically for it. He wants kids to be able to use cell phones during teacher instruction period.
I mean,
by voting no on the budget.
That's the politics of it.
That's the outcome of his vote. That is correct.
And
he voted against, and his Freedom Caucus voted against raising minimum teacher pay.
And the point of pointing this stuff out, people, is because this is what the Freedom Caucus constantly does.
This is the game they play.
Right.
And now we're playing it right back to them.
If we start playing it right back, you're going to sit here and look at and say, well, good Lord, these guys are not the conservatives that they say.
They want to protect women's sports, but they don't want to, in effect, when it comes to a budget, they don't want to put that aside and say, you know what, it's more important to protect our young girls in our schools from biological boys from going into their bathroom. Our politics is more important.
Right.
That's what that's saying to me.
Let's go through each line that he posted here. So number one, he's got $900,000 to create a South Carolina Hall of Fame podcast. I don't know enough about that, but I would imagine if it's staff, that's the reason. Staff or a location.
Yeah,
that would be the reason.
I don't even know what that is. Not being on Ways and Means. We talk about this a lot. We're so focused on our committee work.
Yeah.
That
it gets very difficult.
Yeah. So
but you can easily ask.
I can't speak to that either. South Carolina Hall of Fame, what?
It just says podcast.
You know what I mean? Is it sports related? Is it just South Carolinian? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would, we can ask him. I wish he was more specific in that.
The other one says the 30% increase.
Yeah, and money for the Arts Commission.
Correct.
Here's one thing that the two listeners need to understand. When COVID happened and we all had to get back to work after we, opened back up, everything got more expensive, right? Labor costs, I know just for our company, we saw labor costs increase 18 to 22%.
Yeah.
Right? Government agencies got hit the worst because they could not adapt quickly enough as the private sector could. And so a lot of the overachieving or really good workers were pulled from public agencies into private sector because we could adapt and pay people more, right?
Right.
So a lot of these increases in agency spending is strictly to keep up with inflation. So now, I'm not saying that's the bottom line here.
Well, that's what we discussed earlier. That was, was it a camp?
Some of it was for, some educational stuff.
But regardless,
summer camps.
You also need to look at what has a return on investment. If I can invest $1 and it return $1.68, that keeps your taxes. And as we continue to lower your state income taxes, that's one of those things that it goes towards.
And I think Leon
Art had a
Stavronakis talked about that, the IRR basically on a invested dollar in the arts comes back pretty healthy.
Now, and then the other one was $9 million to ETV.
Yep.
Now, did we not just fight in judicial reform to make sure that all these things are recorded?
Yes.
That everything is transparent. Who do you think does that?
Yes.
That is SEETV that does all of this stuff.
Yep.
And that requires more staff. That
So we
requires more servers.
demand more transparency. Transparency comes with a cost.
Yeah.
Correct?
Correct.
So these folks who record, have the headsets on in all of our committee meetings, they will now be in JMSC proceedings.
And they have to pay that staff to sit there.
Yeah. Now, again, that we're not suggesting that $9 million just for JMSC streaming services, but we want to make it clear we want more transparency. We want to have South Carolina citizens to be able to look in on anything that we're doing in a subcommittee, committee, ad hoc committee, floor debates, full transparency.
Correct.
And that does come with a price tag.
The other one says funding of Planned Parenthood, which that was the argument that I had with Kilmartin. You can sit here and say we're funding Planned Parenthood. However, we have banned abortion in the state of South Carolina.
Yep.
And so that narrative to try and make it sound like we're funding abortions, and we've fought that 3 times in the past.
Yep.
And lost all 3 times, which cost the taxpayers millions of dollars.
Yeah, and so I'm not a person to defend Planned Parenthood, but I do want to explain what services Planned Parenthood does provide. So Planned Parenthood has always been they are associated with abortion. Agree? Yeah.
Agreed.
While they provide abortion services, which I don't agree with, they also provide other services to women and women's health.
Correct.
Not just abortion.
And contraceptives.
So, right. So, again, this could be a both and. We can, in our budget from federal monies, be funding a facility that offers prenatal services, checkups, annual breast exams, cancer, things of that nature for women. And so what he's saying, funding for Planned Parenthood, that may be true. But what is also true is we're not funding abortions.
Because we
have a state law
correct
that restricts that. So
and it's that narrative. It's that constant.
correct. So and again,
twisting.
folks, that is just a quick soundbite of how both can be true there. Right.
Right. And now I'm gonna skip down because we went through all this. It would take about a whole episode.
Yeah.
But one of the things says Department of Transportation funding is a small fraction of the funding going to woke higher education. Have you seen South Carolina roads lately? Why can't we focus on the core members? Now, this budget, as we just said, increased $200 million just going back to local for roads.
Yep.
Not to mention the bridges. And
$200 million in bridge repair.
Right. And I'm going to make this clear. You look back, the Freedom Caucus wants to vote against the budget, period.
Yes.
There's always going to be a reason.
Yep.
If you are voting for anything in the budget, and if it just has the Planned Parenthood, well, then you're a rhino.
Yes.
You know? So the budget's never going to be good enough for the Freedom Caucus to justify being on there, and then yet they will whine. They will vote against the same funds that they're requesting for their cities, and then whine that they don't get them whenever they have no intentions of voting for the budget.
Yeah.
They use the budget for their campaign material to try and claim everyone else is a rhino or a uniparty or
This is
anything else.
literally the definition of political theater.
Correct.
Yes. And it can be frustrating when you're trying to make a serious effort to govern the state in a financially conservative manner.
Yeah, and so as we're going through the budget, one of the things that we have to look at, that's brought up constantly is earmarks. Last year, the total spent on earmarks was $713 million. Out of that, now that was 713. Now the narrative is we just continue to spend more and more and more and more.
Right.
Now, granted, earmarks are the money that's come in above and beyond what has been requested and what is needed to operate
Yes.
the government, right? So,
Yeah, earmarks typically are, again, I requested $13,000 for bulletproof vests for some first responders here
for
in
the fire department.
Yep,
Yes.
here in Rock Hill. That's an earmark.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
So
the $2 million for the infrastructure for water and sewer
for
at
Chester to Rock Hill.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was technically an earmark that I made. You've made earmarks in the past.
The $20 million for Blue Granite
Blue
last
Granite,
year
right.
to keep all of those citizens
Yep.
bill lower.
So I don't. What was the total number? The total amount.
Total
for earmarks?
amount for earmarks last year was $713 million.
Okay.
This year it was only $423 million. Now that sounds stupid
Almost
to
a
say
$290
Yeah.
million reduction in earmarks.
but this is showing to where we are bringing these things down. Now,
Yeah.
granted, our budget is not going to lower because if our state's growing, then our budget's going to be higher.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
We can't control that because
Yep.
even the $1 billion that we sent back in tax relief, if we took that out, then our budget's lower than it was last year.
Right.
You know, but
tell
that
you,
has to be part of the budget.
I feel like this is just always going to be a can't win.
Well, I don't.
In the sense of if we really are concerned with the opinion of some of our colleagues that belong to the Freedom Caucus.
I think the only thing that we need to do is we need to get better at educating our constituents. And this podcast has been a great way
Yes.
for people to see the shenanigans.
We got to get communication of what the good things that we're doing.
The Freedom Caucus
Again-
started this stuff in November of 22
Yes.
with getting their whole groups and helping spread the message. And just to show how much of a BS message this is, I'm going to use Moms for Liberty York County as the example. So I posted all of the things that Moms for Liberty should stand for. Keeping boys out of our girls' restroom. Keeping the pornographic books out of our children's section.
So Moms for Liberty was for the budget then.
Well, you would think. But the only post that they put up is they share Thomas Beach's post.
Come on, are you serious?
Yeah. So they don't share the positives of the budget. They share Thomas Beach's post. And that, now, granted, that's just York County. Other chapters throughout the state don't have a problem. But it's funny that our chapter chair, that was Jackie Terraville, was part of that November of 22 meeting to share and push that Freedom Caucus agenda.
That sounds like
It becomes an echo,
collusion.
not just them, the York County Republican Women Rising did the exact same thing. And perhaps they're doing that because David O'Neill was one of the ones to vote against it. Now, David, I don't put David in the same category as the rest of these Freedom Caucus members. I really don't.
Yeah.
David will sit there and tell you there were some good things in the budget, there's some bad things in the budget.
Yep.
And at some point, you got to hit a button, and you're going to end up on one side or the other.
Yes.
So sometimes you stick with the crew that tells you the truth, you know. But what is really funny about it is this whole budget thing. We come down on Wednesday. The Freedom Caucus sends out this narrative that we are going to amend Sine Die, and we're going to open up the health czar. So whenever we came into,
We're going to create a health czar.
Yeah.
So again, Senate Bill 915, healthcare agency consolidation. We're going to take 7 healthcare agencies, put them all under an office of public health.
Yeah.
Have a secretary of health who now those directors or associate directors of those individual agencies, Department on Aging, Mental Health, Special Need, Disability Special Needs, DAODIS, all of these individual 6, 7 healthcare agencies now are held accountable.
right.
And that director, that Secretary of Public Health, is now can be yanked by the duly elected governor of the state of South Carolina. You
Correct.
know?
The person that's actually elected by the people,
Right.
and chosen by the people.
So again, with that healthcare consolidation, the rumor mill started, and again, this was emails by our local GOP
Yes, because they followed my SCGOP.
and others,
And this medical freedom group, that's one of the Freedom Caucus groups as well.
and the communication was that we were going to come back in on Wednesday, amend Sine Die, open up to allow Senate Bill 915, the Healthcare Agency Consolidation Bill, or what they call the Health Czar Bill, so we could then basically pass it.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have had a problem if it opened up.
No.
But we've said over and over and over again, the Senate must amend sine die.
Yep.
Before the House even takes that up.
And we got calls about it.
And it still could pass this year.
That Tuesday hey, heard y'all doing this. This is, what kind of crap is this? Blah, blah. No. I mean, listen, what you're talking about is the path to do it, and I would support us doing it, but it's not going to happen. We're not taking that back up. And we had people show up in our office, constituents, talking to us about this, a couple hours before we were going to the House floor to vote on the budget. And we were like, man, why are all these people coming down just to talk to us? They could have called us on the phone.
No, they set out a call to action to get everyone there.
But lo and behold, the Freedom Caucus is having a press conference.
Yeah. So they scare everyone there with these two bills to get them there. And then they hold their press conference to discuss the budget. So this way you can get all of the information out, and you've got all these people that are terrified, and you're the freedom fighters. You're the ones doing what's right.
Yeah.
And yet it never even came up. And some of these people, now, you've got a lot of elderly people that it's not as easy to get around, and especially in 100-degree heat at the State House coming down here. And coming from all across the state.
And so, again, there's a small contingent of folks who try to scare the crap out of people that we're going to create basically a South Carolina version of Anthony Fauci, right? And I understand, man, everyone has some PTSD coming out of COVID, right? So,
which hearing his recordings, I would too.
So So that's what pisses me off is like the folks, it feels like we have some operators who are preying on those fears for their own gains, right?
But to try and make it like we're the ones
wanting
Anthony Fauci, that's the lie. That's the problem that I have.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to say I'm not conservative and I want an Anthony Fauci here?
So they have a press conference, and lo and behold, what we're telling our constituent is the truth.
Yeah.
We do not amend sine die. We pass the budget and other conference reports out, JMSC reform, all those types of things. But this is the story that's being written by the Freedom Caucus. We had great success today at the state, and this I'm quoting from a text message. We had great success today at the State House, y'all. So thankful for all the efforts that we put in since, They were going to pass the Health Czar Bill 915, but Representative Thomas Beach just told me that due to our presence here and the grassroots public pressure, they are not addressing it, and it is off the table. Rob Harris confirmed this as well. I'm like,
that's who you should get your information from.
What are you talking about? Like, this is not reality.
Yeah.
Or it's not the reality I'm living in. We had two constituents, right?
Yeah.
Come Wednesday morning.
Yeah. And they were representing the York County GOP.
I did get one phone call.
Oh, I got tons of messages.
From a good guy, a voter, a constituent of mine, and he asked, and you heard me in the office on Tuesday, because I am tired of the BS.
Yeah.
And again, if we take this bill back up,
this is the problem with poor leadership in our local party, of just buying into this rhetoric and pushing it out and not wanting. I mean, there's 7 of us compared to 1 of us that's in the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
Not wanting to speak to anyone else, just wanting people to hear whatever the Freedom Caucus is pushing. I mean, that's where I start calling them fascists. It's like to shut our commies. You want to shut down any voice that opposes the narrative that you're trying to push. And you're trying to do it through fear.
It's frustrating for sure. I'm hopeful that in the off season, I personally can take a reset, because I've become bitter. I mean, I really have. And I never wanted to get to this headspace.
I plan on churning that shit like butter.
It is just, but my personal standard of the way I conduct business, I don't like the name calling, the finger pointing, getting personal. I want to talk about policy, right? And
you smacked me for a year and a half, and I took it. And I'm not taking it anymore. Matter of fact, I'm talking about not you. I'm talking about the Freedom Caucus with that narrative. Like, you want to sit here and twist words and play games for a year and a half. And just as one of the members came up and said, "Hey guys, we need to call a truce.
We
on
need to
this.
bury
You're
the hatchet."
we need to bury the hatchet. No, screw you. You hit me for a year and a half. Don't sit here and think I'm going to let up.
Well,
I tried to be nice to you. I tried to work with you. Tried to make you see, because I understood where you're coming from.
Our point of view.
Yeah, but you want to continue hitting me and continue spreading misinformation and twisting the narrative and lies. And a perfect example of this.
And folks, again, to listeners, I appreciate your loyalty and listening to the program. This is literally DC style politics that has been well funded.
Being funded from DC.
This is out of state money coming in to push a narrative. And listen, this kind of chaos that drives this division, it generates all types of money for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Okay, there's an infrastructure and an apparatus that does this stuff, and they make a lot of money.
I mean, many of them are fundraising right now.
And they are benefiting on the chaos. Okay, so choose to not be a part of this mess. Let's just don't be a spoke in the wheel, please.
No, I'm using this as an example. How long do we got? Do I got at least 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Okay. So, do you remember last year, the beginning of February, it was the first vote that we took that we actually caught heat from our congressman over, or
was this the 9
members.
budget amendments, or
this was the 40
Biden
something people on the CRT, Ray Felder's anti-CRT bill? Well, you and I, along with it looks like Ballantyne, Bannister, Bradley, Calhoun, Carter, Felder, who was the author of the bill, Wheeler, Wooten were the only, and Weston Newton were the only Republicans that voted against the amendment that said that you could sue teachers.
Right, individually.
Correct.
Yes.
And we voted against that. Now, Elizabeth Enns goes and puts that post up and starts spreading that misinformation.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, and we can always break this up into the next segment, talk about the reason why. What was the motivation to why we voted the way we did when it came to that amendment?
There was multiple reasons, but number one is Ray Felder was the author of the bill that worked on it forever and said, this will kill the bill.
Yes.
We cannot approve this. We listened to her on that, and my thought process behind that is I don't believe in being able to sue police officers individually either.
Correct.
So why would I want to be able to sue a teacher individually?
Right. And so there's got to be some protection, some legal shield that if you work for a public school or if you're law enforcement, that
department covers you.
You can't sue the officer. You're going to sue the department. That's
because
right.
they can let you go at that time.
Yeah. I can't imagine being a teacher or law enforcement knowing that every decision, split-second decision, especially when it comes to law enforcement, could be, just hindsight being 20/20, being picked apart by the best legal minds.
Right.
I mean, that's a dangerous position to get into. And guess what? All the good police officers, they gone.
And that was one of our...
Guess what's going to happen to the teachers?
Same thing.
Vacuum. And the result is shitty education, and then they're going to turn around and bitch and moan that our public schools suck.
Yeah.
So pick your poison, folks. You know what I mean? Like, take the extra step and think this one through.
Yeah.
And that's why we voted the way we did.
We need to be standing up for our teachers and for our first responders. They are the ones who are building.
You can't get one without the other. You know? I mean, it's ridiculous. Go ahead.
So on this bill, I started getting bashed because it was Elizabeth Enns who basically talked about the ban bullying indoctrination in classroom. But what she posts is the picture of the amendment. So it makes it look like we all voted against it, like we're rhinos.
Yeah.
We voted for the bill. We voted against the amendment.
Yes.
Now, come this past week.
But now, again, let the two listeners know that amendment was successful.
Yes, it passed. The amendment passed. Went to the Senate.
We were in the minority there.
Yep. So as this goes to the Senate, it doesn't get passed. It goes to what has to go to conference.
Yeah, they non-concur, goes to conference.
Yeah. So as they're sitting in conference, guess what kills the bill? And now we don't have anything banning CRT in our classroom. It's that amendment.
Yep.
And so I just posted that just saying, hey, next time you want to come at me and call me a rhino, this is why. You think that you have to have teeth. You did not need to have teeth in that because the districts can be held responsible.
Yep.
And they can.
This is a perfect example of folks thinking perfection instead of the good.
Correct.
You know what I mean? We had a great bill, and all we had to do was not pass that amendment, and we could have had no CRT.
That would have been one more thing that we could have passed.
Yep. And hey, the great thing is if we're elected this November and have the honor of serving our districts again next session, I guarantee you we're going to get flack that, hey, why haven't we banned CRT yet?
Yeah.
So Freedom Caucus, I'm going ahead and giving you your talking point in January of 2025. You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. So two other items I want to talk about when we were down there for the budget was the Conference Committee on Judicial Reform.
Yes.
You served on that ad hoc committee. Thought we had, 16 recommendations that came out of that House ad hoc committee?
We got most of them on there.
I think so too.
Yeah. Instead of having unlimited candidates, it is capped at 6, which I think 6 is too much anyway, but let it go.
Personally, I was fine with 5 or 6. I thought that was a reasonable number.
Yeah.
Because, we think we're busy now with 3.
Correct.
We
did term limit the amount that legislators can serve on JMSC. We gave the governor.
Let's talk about that framework. So JMSC used to be just made up of appointees from the House, Senate. Some were members of the House and the Senate with 2 appointees that were non-members, right?
Yeah.
Now the executive branch has
it's 12
participation.
members. Executive branch has
4,
4, House 4, Senate 4. So it does give you a voice. Of course, the legislature can still
It puts us all in the same boat, man.
Correct.
Getting in the same boat a lot of times forces the members individually to align the goals.
Correct.
So,
we put term limits on it. So now anyone that served more than 2 terms will not be able to be on the JMSC. So that is good. So you don't have certain people just having power whenever a judge comes up for re-election. The biggest negative I see from it is we were unable to adjust the magistrate reform.
Yeah.
But the Senate would not hear that. So let's get this good bill passed, and it passed unanimous.
Yep. And, I'm glad you brought that up because, again, this is a universal theme, it seems like, down in the State House, is you're not going to achieve perfection.
Correct.
You know what I mean? We can improve the situation. We can do better. We can get 80, 90% of what we want, but rarely.
I was very surprised not to see Freedom Caucus members vote against it. But
is there a time where you're going to get 100% of what you want? Sometimes that does happen. Yeah, but very, very rare. So,
but this was a good bill with a few exceptions, and it's a great first step.
I thought so too. It addressed some of the issues, and you know what? And again, maybe this is just an opportunity that state government can better communicate what we're doing, right? Because I think a lot of the complaints or some of the problems that were raised, some of them could be attributed to perception and optics. Not all, by any means, but
narrative.
But that's a big deal, right? Yeah. Optics and the way people perceive state government to work is a big deal. So
and that's one of the reasons we're trying to get out in front of all this.
Yeah, so why not be more transparent? Yeah. That's another thing. All of these JMSC proceedings
shown live.
They're going to be online, folks. Yeah. They're streaming. And if you can't watch when they're going on, they'll be archived.
Yep.
So you can go back and watch it at your leisure. So I thought that was a win for sure.
And with it being unanimous, that's always a win.
Yeah, and so I want to segue for a moment. Let's just talk about, and I'm going to get
everything that
rapid fire.
Okay.
In our first session, and I'm not taking responsibility. We were a part of these successes. Repealed CON, strengthened penalties for fentanyl trafficking, passed bond reform, passed the fetal heartbeat bill, banned critical race theory that then blew up. But I'm talking about House successes, what you and I are responsible for. Expanded the school choice, passed the constitutional carry, ESG Pension Protection Act, the Help Not Harm bill that we passed, the Social Media Regulation Act, the Child Online Safety Act, which age limits on porn, the Anti-Child Luring Act, the Telehealth and Telemedicine Modernization Act, the Veterans Property Tax Exemption, the indexing of the unemployment benefits that you and I talked about,
Yep.
Name, image, and likeness legislation, the Health Policy Agency restructuring that ultimately failed, but we passed in the House, universal school choice this year, we elected Kittredge and Verdon
To the Supreme Court, so we strengthened the conservatism.
Yep.
Or the conservative voice on the Supreme Court.
Yep. The anti-DEI legislation and the JMSC reform.
Yep. Gavin's Law.
And I mean, man, that is a page
One
long
session
of stuff. Bullet
But yeah,
points.
we're just rhinos.
You know?
And not to mention, we've got 2 more that are out there that we are working on right now, which is the kidnapping and domestic violence bill.
Yes.
So those will hopefully be 2. And truthfully, I don't want to say that we were successful just because we passed it out of the House, because we know good and damn well that what we do also depends on what the Senate does. And we can play that game and say we're the righteous ones, let's stand on our soapbox. If we know it's going to kill the bill in the Senate,
We try to go ahead and modify it then.
Right.
And again, that's a good point. We talk about this a lot, you and I, just because we're common sense folks. We want to pass. We're not here to write bills. We're here to pass legislation that improves the environment here in South Carolina for our voters and citizens of South Carolina.
and we try to count those votes before we're sending something over a lot of times to know what is going to be the hang up. What's going to keep this bill from getting heard in the Senate?
Right.
You know?
And a lot of times that's offline.
Yeah.
We're walking across the lobby.
The most of that is
y'all,
offline.
You know, we have a lot of colleagues that give me a lot of heck for not being in my seat because they always joke around like, man, are you trying to run for Senate? And I'm like, no, but I am over there trying to, get the temperature of the water. So, hey, if we're sending this over, y'all going to pass it? Hell no. You know? And I try to communicate that back to.
What's the holdup?
Yes. So, so let's talk about that one.
So the kidnapping and domestic violence bill, and I have to put this out here because this was S-142. Now, I voted for each one of these bills individually whenever they came to the floor.
Yep.
However,
Was this the one that you were the only no vote?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was the only no vote, Republican or Democrat. And the reason I was a no vote is because I've always been told it's unconstitutional to pass 2 bills at one time.
It's that 2 subject.
Yeah. Now, granted, I'm told, oh, well, this won't be a problem. You know, it's going to take someone to complain to the Supreme Court for it to be an issue. But at that point, if it does pass, then you're setting a precedent.
So the funny thing, let me give some context, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of humor on the subject.
Yeah.
It just so happened that Tommy Pope was the speaker, and our speaker, Merle Smith, was down on the floor and sitting there talking to Guffey and I, right? And what this conference committee was doing was asking for free conference.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the 2 listeners out there, if you don't know what free conference is, what happens when a bill goes into conference, they only can take one version, the Senate version, or the other. And now if they want to jam it up and mash it around and this, that, and the other, and add some stuff, they have to go back to the bodies and ask for free conference. We then have to grant permission for that. And Merle,
Free conference, they can write it any way they want to.
That's correct. And so Merle was telling us an old story of when he was a freshman legislator that he just would make a point to vote no on free conference just because, he felt that was going around the processes that are put in place by our founders that, hey, if you want to write a law, these are the rules you live by. You got to go through the process. You pre-file it. It gets a hearing in subcommittee, whatever committee it's assigned to. It goes to full committee. It gets passed out of full committee, goes to the House, and goes through the right process. And he was sort of joking around about how he always used to vote no because it felt like free conference just,
It came that time and we hit the no button.
And so when this vote comes up, we both turn to him and say, oh, well, the speaker said we can't vote for free conference and hit no as a joke. Ha, folks, that's tongue in cheek. And
he walked away quickly.
And he's like, oh, I'm getting out of here, just joking around. I subsequently waited a little while and then turned it back to green. And
I left mine red.
But again, you had other principals involved
Right.
in, and
I let everyone know the day before, and everyone's telling me, like, you're going to get beat up on this. And I said, look, I support both of these laws.
bills individually.
Or both of the bills individually. I just don't see it as constitutional, and I felt like I'm taking an oath to uphold the Constitution. If I don't believe something's constitutional, why am I trying to do it?
This is another one of those things where he's letting perfection get in the way of good.
Yeah. Well, I just could not do it and have a good conscience about it.
And so we talked about this. Obviously, one of these bills is a sensitive topic, and there is a very strong online presence.
Yes.
And so when
everybody was coming to me,
when
like,
Guffey's going red, we're like, hey, prepare yourself. Brace yourself, fool.
I even had another one of the leaders come up and was like, look, how about you just take a walk? Because you trust me, you don't want to vote red on this. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I kind of bust the Freedom Caucus's balls on taking a walk. And if you're down there, you're there to make a decision. I'm not taking a walk. If I'm there, I'm pushing the button one way or the other.
Hey, man.
But, I think we're okay. Those women understand why I voted against it.
Yeah.
And,
I think you got to be very precise on the hills you want to die on.
But those might be one of those things that I have mailers coming out.
Wait a minute.
I'm for kidnapping.
Yeah, wait a minute. You're for child luring?
Yeah.
You're for sexual predators luring kids into the van with candy?
And I'm for domestic violence.
Yeah, that's not going to pull well for you, pal.
That little sound clip there of me just saying that, I'm sure will be you.
So let's wrap that up and talk about primary results. We had a number of runoffs, not only locally but statewide. Let's go through the Senate and the House runoffs. And this is not going to be all of them. These are just some of the ones that I wanted to highlight. In the House, we had up in House District, I believe that was 28, which was Ashley Trantham's.
Yes.
She's serving that district right now. Huff defeated Carrie Smith. So Huff will be replacing Ashley Trantham there.
And that's who Ashley wanted to run for that seat.
Yes, Ashley Trantham endorsed Huff there. Also, is it Sarita Edgerton defeated LaBounty in House District 34. That is the House District that was vacated by Roger Nutt when Roger Nutt ran for the Senate seat. So Edgerton won there. And then lastly, Blake Sanders defeated Gillian in House District 9, which is over there in Anderson.
Now, if you think my beard's weird, wait till you check out this cat's.
Who? Blake Sanders? Oh, he's got the whatever. What
Rolly Fingers mustache?
Yeah.
With
Is
the
it
beard on top of it?
is that wax or oil? You would know better than I would.
I don't do those gay things. I don't know.
Well, but you put some sort of conditioner because I see you do it sometimes in your
I
go-to.
use Bearded Mother Trucker beard balm.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever kind of Vidal Sassoon stuff that you use, I'm sure he uses.
Just keeps it smooth. But I can't control it with all the twisting and everything.
Hey, it says sophisticated.
Yeah. Mine just grows in all white trashy like this.
So those were the House runoffs. Also in the U.S. House, and this was close. Biggs defeated Burns.
Yeah.
Over there, Burns was endorsed by Trump.
Yeah, he's the one I met at the convention, said that he was Trump's pastor.
Yeah, that's right. And so he got edged out. So Biggs she's a veteran,
yes,
right? Or in the reserve right now. She's like a lieutenant colonel woman. And man, I think that was really close.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 50.8%.
Shout out to Muley. I think Muley ran that race.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
So she won the Republican primary there in that runoff. And then over in the Senate, we had a few of our colleagues vacate House seats to run for the Senate. Wanted to highlight a few of those. Jason Elliott from the Greenville area defeated Carper for Senate District 6. Garrett defeated Bumgardner in Senate District 10. That's over near like West Columbia, Aiken area.
Garrett was the incumbent, though.
Yes,
so no
he was.
Change.
Yep. And these are Republican primary runoffs. Our colleague Roger Nutt defeated Lee Bright in Senate District 12. And then on the Carlisle Kennedy.
Yeah.
And
that was a shocker.
Katrina Shealy. And man, Shealy has been a long time, I would say, beloved senator.
She's a huge advocate for children.
Yes.
I mean, every time I was looking at doing a bill to protect kids online, it seemed like she already had something.
That was her thing, man. And
I, of course, didn't agree with her on the abortion issue.
And I think that's what got her.
Yeah.
I think there was, whether it was Shealy, Sandy Sin, Penry,
yeah,
all went down in
they
primaries.
all three did?
Yes.
And they were the sister.
And Mia McLeod, a fourth one of the sisters, didn't just decide not to run. And that was another, that was a Democratic primary runoff that I wanted to highlight. Overture Walker defeated our colleague Ivory Thigpen. There in that Richland.
Ivory.
Yeah, in Senate District 22. And then another one, our House colleague, Ott. Old Russell Ott, man.
Beating Dick.
Yeah, defeated Dick Harpootlian, a longtime senator. You know, that district got redrawn to, so it wasn't just a Richland, Lexington. It was Richland, Lexington, and what was it, Calhoun down there?
I don't know. Orangeburg area?
I think it's, yeah. And long story short, I think that rural district makes up 10% of the Senate district, and they turned out 25% of the primary votes.
Ooh.
Yes. Yes. So, hey.
That was speaking volumes.
And you know what? Senator Harpootlian gave credit where credit was due, and he said, hey, you know what? They ran a better campaign than us. Their campaign reached the goals that our campaign just didn't, or fell a little bit short. And congratulations to Russell Ott for a well-run campaign, and he is supporting him and endorsing him in the general.
I always liked.
So kudos to the statesmanship shown by Dick Harpootlian.
I thought Russell Ott is the common sense guy on the left. I like his approach. I like the way he thinks things through. I don't always agree with him, but he's always got.
But you can
a
follow the
decent
logic,
argument.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So,
and then, of course, locally,
let's talk about the local
we
race.
had the York County Sheriff runoff.
Yeah.
Between Michael Belt and Tony Breeden. That race came very close. We ended up having just over 17,000 people come out. Breeden won that race by almost 700 votes. So Tony Breeden will be our next sheriff of York County.
Yeah. And man, I thought
that got very contentious, though.
It did. You know, I got a lot of, you know, whether it was text, phone calls, emails, those types of things. And, you know, I told people, I said, hey, whether it's your candidate that wins or not, feel confident and comfortable that we're going to have a well-qualified sheriff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I think...
And again, Breeden was going to bring a different set of strengths than what Michael Belt was going to bring. But nonetheless, quality-wise, they were both great candidates. Well, and again, depending on what your priorities of what skills are more important, you'd vote for one or the other. I don't like getting involved with, you know, getting in the weeds and the muck and the mud of some of the political games and some of the stuff that we saw. And again, I think social media is just a terrible platform for it, because what happens is...
Because people just lie and say whatever they want to.
Yeah, with no accountability. And you can set up accounts and just start parroting out stuff. No, but here's another thing. You have good character guys who are trying to run a good, effective race to win, right?
Yeah.
But then you get some very vocal supporters who have a strong social media following, and then that sometimes can drown out the candidate's message, and then the reverb kicks back to where that defines his candidacy or her candidacy. And, you know, I got a lot of text messages. I had some conversation. Breeden won. And folks had some concerns like, oh, man, you know, do you think? And I said, no, I don't. I don't think that's going to happen. I have sat down and talked with, you know, Tony much better than I do.
Yeah, there was too many lies being spread. I mean, it's what you'd call a shadow campaign. And maybe that's just supporters that are making phone calls on behalf. And I'm sure the same come out of Tony's camp, you know, where, you know, I've seen it with some of the people that I've argued with before, saying false things and coming after Belt's character.
Yep.
My argument was against, you know, what I did not like. And in my opinion, the first race, how many votes was the difference between the two of them?
Oh, it was a couple hundred.
was a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So
it was marginal.
Like 800.
It was literally like the margin of error. I mean, easily.
He was first. Belk was first. He got endorsed by number 3, which was Tolson, and he got endorsed by number 4 in Blevins, and then Clevenger decided to stay out.
Yeah.
So at first,
Wise move. Heath.
Anyone looking at it would say Breeden is fighting for air to try and get there because you already lost to him. Then now you got number 3 and 4 coming out and saying this is a better candidate.
All right, hold on. Let me pause you for that. I remember when you and I were talking about that. Do you think that gave the Belk campaign a false sense that they were in the driver's seat? Because I didn't think that. Because of the primary results when it was 5 wide Talladega style, I thought, man, this is going to be a coin flip. This is who is going to outwork, who is going to knock doors, who's going to get their message out more effectively in 2 weeks.
I think both did, but I think Breeden's campaign was ran better.
Yeah.
And the fact that Belk kind of pigeonholed himself into being the administrator by everyone saying, oh, he's got the administrative experience.
Yeah.
Once you did that, then
again,
that puts the label.
Did he say that, or did his supporters say that?
A lot of that was him, like him talking about him having the administrative, and then it was.
But here's another thing too:
supporters as well,
giving credit where credit's due. And I told you personally when the runoff was going on in those 2 weeks, I thought the Breeden campaign did a good job of painting him into that corner.
Correct.
You know what I mean? What was it?
Administrator or leader?
No.
Hold the line or hold the pen. Those were the two messages.
It was that. It was hold the line or hold a pin type stuff. And again, to all the Belk supporters out there, I don't think that was a fair comparison. But campaign taglines, I thought it was effective, right?
Yeah.
It got the message across that what Breeden was trying to separate himself from his opposition was, hey, I'm on the front lines. I'm going to be out there hustling and working to uphold the law while this other guy's going to be pushing paper.
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, again, it's not true.
But it was because of Breeden getting tagged,
you know what I mean?
Tagged initially as being that person that didn't have administrative experience is what the tag was.
Yeah.
And basically, as we said, both had experience in those. It just depending on which style that you want.
And again, if you're just talking about campaign tactics and this, that, and the other, what the Breeden campaign did, and I don't know if it was Tony or his folks, he leaned into his supposed opportunity area or weakness, right? Which that's what I do. I would flip anything that someone says about me as a weakness, I would flip it on them. That is textbook classic campaigning.
Well, and Tony
because you want to beat them to it, right?
Though.
You want to beat them and knock the air out of that line before they can even get to it. And I thought, like what you're saying is true. Again, I'm not a big campaign guy and all that kind of stuff. I'm not a operator like that. But like what you said shows to be true.
Yeah.
Thought that Breeden ran a better campaign.
Well,
and the results support that statement.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it's just that. Because as I told Belk, and this was the Saturday before the election, whenever I seen him at the Lake Wiley Children's Charity, I said, look, if you lose this campaign because of the endorsements, because you had Sheriff Tolson, Sheriff Bryant, all these other people involved, if you lose this campaign, don't look at it as your fault. It's not that Belk ran a bad campaign.
Yeah.
But you can thank Sheriff Kevin Tolson's Facebook page, the sending out the email by Sheriff Tolson, the pushing of Democrats going to the polls by Bump Roddy, and the endorsement post by the Democrat Matt Villardo in Fort Mill. Those three things, and Matt Villardo's got rainbows and everything all on his page, and he takes a picture with Michael, who doesn't know who he is as an event, and then post it. And it's one I'm not saying that it's bad to have Democrats support you, but you've got to realize that if you really wanted them to win, you wouldn't be saying, hey, all Democrats, this is who I'm supporting, and putting that out publicly, because you know you're giving the other side ammunition.
Yeah, and I think I got caught in a similar situation where not knowing who some of the people were that I was, say, sharing
taking a picture with or whoever.
Correct.
Yeah.
I had a couple of phone calls during the campaign, and that was a learning lesson. I mean, a lesson for me was, hey, and again, you're not going to be able to vet everybody you take a picture with.
Well, and I always say I take pictures with everybody.
Yeah. But for that to occur, I think maybe that campaign could have realized that and then maybe countered.
I think they had Matt bring it down, but by the time it's posted, it's captured.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the sheriff post.
Yeah.
And
again, if this was a general election, it
I think
probably would have been different.
Kevin Tolson Facebook post to where it said Kevin and I at the bottom of it, and it was bashing Tony personally and of bashing his character. I think that single-handedly swung the election at least 10 points. If that had not have happened, I don't think that it would have swung as much.
Yeah.
And that was a crucial mistake that made it also lost the credibility of having the current sheriff's endorsement.
So, a couple things. I think that a lot of people voted for Beth Tolson on June 11th because of who Kevin Tolson and what he brought to the sheriff's office. Would you agree? I think a lot of people
just that, but I mean, I think the Tolson Bryant name
it was a linkage.
Respect.
It was a linkage. I think a lot of people voted for Beth Tolson because they knew how Kevin Tolson operated and the natural transitive property of, hey, that's his wife. She's going to do the same thing, right? But when she was out, all of those votes were up for grabs. And I don't care. We've talked about this before. I don't care who endorses who. All I'm saying is those votes were up for grabs at that point. I don't think endorsements mean jack. And so when Beth Tolson, the number 3, endorsed, vote getter, and then you said Blevins was number 4 endorsed, those don't mean anything. I think all those votes were up for grabs.
I disagree.
Oh. Again, Ralph Norman endorsed 6, 7, right?
Oh.
And no. And he's he wins elections here. Ralph endorsed 7 or 8 local races, and 2 of his endorsements were successful.
But I can tell you from the phone calls I made on behalf of Breeden, and especially to people in the western part of the county, they actually were only looking at, once they supported Blevins to begin with, once they saw Blevins was supporting Belk, that they weren't even looking at anybody else. They were just going to show up and vote for Belk. And those were phone calls that we had that we actually turned votes by getting them to listen to both. Because that becomes the majority of voters.
What we're talking about, 2 things. They're different. Public endorsement versus private support, right?
But
so
Blevins publicly saying is, I'm going to support Belk.
Yeah.
Those people were just listening to that.
And so, again, I think this comes down to candidacies. How good are the candidates? How good are they in that environment? And you know better than I do what a runoff consists of and what it takes, right? You're right. I mean, it is a gold rush to get your message out and try to capture the folks who are still undecided. And that's the challenge, is a lot of times that those things are baked already. And how do you focus efforts? And I think the Breeden campaign did a better job of identifying those independents who hadn't made up their minds yet.
Well, I think one of the biggest things was social media.
Just
on Facebook, it was over 500,000 impressions.
Yeah, again.
Just on Breeden's Facebook page.
That's getting the message
huge.
Out. And again, I don't know what Belk's numbers showed, but
I can tell you, I haven't seen that high of a number of impressions in a 2-week period on any campaign.
Yeah. So, but again, obviously this was important to a lot of folks. I mean, we had a pretty decent turnout, did we not?
17,000. I wouldn't say great.
Yeah, man. I tell you, it's like people don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, they do, but not really.
They do enough to talk about it, not to show up. They just want to talk about it, not be about it.
Yeah, so, well, first session's in the books, man. I know we got to come back in September possibly for some additional conference reports.
So we can bring the health czar.
The speaker has committed that we're not coming back in July and August so folks can enjoy their summers. So, man, that'll wrap up this episode. Everybody have a safe, happy July 4th.
Yes.
And enjoy Independence Day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Remember those who made this life so easy.
Oh, I gotta say